In this video, you and I get to both implement and verify port security on a layer 2 switch port. Let's begin. So for our plan of attack, let's do this. Let's work with the access layer switch with its gig 00 interface. That happens to be where there's a computer. It's actually a Kali Linux box. It's available to you in the lab. And let's go into interface gig 00. We'll do switch port mode access because we cannot use a dynamic port. We'll specify switch port access VLAN 10 to make sure that's in the right VLAN, and switch port host. In our lab environment, I need to do that one as well. So it'll actually force the switch port mode access. It'll also do the port fast, which will be much better as far as bouncing the port up and down. So let's do all these three for this port. And then we can do a show Vlan brief. And the do command is because we're in configuration mode. We need the do commands. We can do our show commands. So we'll do a show Vlan brief just to verify that gig 00 is associated with VLAN 10. We'll also do a show MAC address table for VLAN 10 to see how many are there. And we have other commands like show port-security for a specific interface and show port security in general. And then this command right here is what's going to implement it. And I put all of these up here because we may or may not do them in the exact order, but these are the commands that are going to be very helpful as you and I discover, verify, and then correct, if we need to, any challenges that arise as a result of port security. And you'll see what I mean in just a moment. So let's go to the lab and let's go to the access layer switch and start working on interface gig 00. So here in DCNUG, which is our management computer, we'll open up PuTTY, it's in the upper left-hand corner, and we'll open up a connection to access 1, which is our access layer switch. And so let's go to interface gig 0/0, and we'll do switch port mode access and switch port access VLAN 10. And we'll also do a switch port host, which will also enable port fast on that port. So the switch port host is very convenient for the reasons we just talked about, but also in this lab environment, it's important to make the lab work. So please include that when you do the lab if you're doing it on the virtual lab. So let's verify a few things. We'll do a show Vlan brief. And sure enough, there's gig 00 assigned to VLAN 10. That's great. Let's also do a show MAC address. Now, because we're in interface configuration mode, it's not going to be really helpful very often with context-sensitive help. So by knowing the command, you'd have to actually type it out here. So do show MAC address dash table for VLAN 10, press enter. And the key is, if you don't remember the syntax, you could drop out of configuration mode, back to privilege mode, and then just do the question marks to get the context-sensitive help along the way. So here I just want to verify how many MAC addresses were currently learned by the switch associated with VLAN 10. And if we hit the up arrow key, we could also add the interface gig 0/0 as a condition. And that would show us just the MAC addresses associated with VLAN 10 just on gig 00. So we have 3. And there's our Kali Linux box from our previous video. So that's great. Now currently, if we do a show port security for interface gig 0/0, it's going to say, it's disabled. You don't have port security enabled on this interface. But it is showing us that if we did enable it, that the violation mode, if we exceeded the max number of MAC addresses, it would be shut down. And also here's the maximum number of MAC addresses. However, because it's disabled, that feature is not being used at the moment. So I want to point out something before we enable port security. So the maximum number of learned MAC addresses on the port, if we enable the feature, is 1. And if we go above 1, we're going to go ahead and have a violation, which is going to shut down the port. Look at this. For VLAN 10, all off of gig 00 in the lab environment, I see 3 different MAC addresses. And that's like, if I do the math on that, that's like 2 too many. So just be aware that if we enable port security, which we're going to do, if we enable port security and we have more than just one device that sends a frame, we're going to have a violation and the port's going to be shut down. Because we currently have 3 MAC addresses that are hanging off of that gig 00 that could speak at any time. One other command is a show port-security, and that's just going to show us all of our interfaces. So we have no interfaces that currently have port security enabled, and as a result, they're not showing up here. So let's enable port security with the knowledge that we're probably going to get a violation. So we'll go ahead and we're still in interface config for gig 00, and the syntax is switch port space port security. That's it. And that'll take the defaults, and it is now active. So if we do a show port security and press enter, it now shows us that gig 00 is port security enabled. The security action, that's the violation action, is shut down. And the maximum MAC addresses that it's willing to handle is 1 on that port. So the moment we have more than one MAC address who generates a frame on gig 00 that the switch sees, we're going to have a port security violation. And if we don't want to wait for it, we don't have to. So we can go to our Kali Linux box. And for the Kali Linux box, the user is root, R-O-O-T, and the password is root backwards. It's just T-O-O-R, and press enter. And here on Kali Linux over on the left, if we click on the icon to open a terminal, it'll do that for us. And from here, let's do a ping to 10.16.0.1, which is just the switched virtual interface on Core 1. Yeah, check it out. The reason that's not working is because I guess the other MAC address from one other device was already seen, and now because Kali's trying to talk, he's being rejected, and that port has been shut down. We can verify that by going back to the CLI. All right, so here we have the port security violation caused by MAC address. That MAC address is the one from our Kali Linux box on gig 00, and that interface is down. Nobody's happy about that as far as anybody who was on that port before. So we can do a show interface status space ERR-disabled, press enter, and that will show all of our ports that are error disabled and also the reason. So we have a port security violation which caused it to go down. So in this video and lab, we've had the opportunity to implement port security and also get a first-hand seat looking at, wow, there goes the violation because we had more than the default of one MAC address that showed up as a source address on that port. So in the next video, what I'd like to do is talk with you about some common tweaks that we're likely to do in a production environment with port security so it helps us in protecting the network and at the same time not causing a lot of overhead and ports going down unnecessarily. So I'll see you in that next lab. Meanwhile, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.